welcome to today's webinar brought to you by BlueSteps, the Candidate Career Service of AESC. To introduce myself, my name is Lisa Wales and I'm the Director of BlueSteps Partnerships and host of today's webinar. Feel free to submit your questions and comments throughout today's event using the Q&A box located on your screen. BlueSteps members will also receive a copy of today's recording via a post-event email, so do look out for that as well. Before we get started, I know that a number of you are new to both BlueSteps and AESC, so we just wanted to provide a quick overview of who we are and what we do. AESC is the Association of Executive Search and Leadership Consultants, so it's the global association that represents the profession of executive search and leadership consulting. In order to join AESC, search firms must pass our association's rigorous quality and ethical standards. This ensures that as a candidate, if you work with an AESC member firm or consultant, you know that you're working with one of the most top quality search professionals in the world, which also includes today's expert panel. AESC also own and operate a candidate career service called BlueSteps. BlueSteps membership provides access to a wide range of career tools and resources, including webinars, workshops, a global search firm directory, a compensation benchmarking tool, and much more. Through our unique connection with AESC member firms, we're able to offer career intel, insights, and support that you just can't get anywhere else, directly from the executive search community. So if you would like to join BlueSteps, you can do so today with an exclusive 15% discount using the code executive15. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to bluesteps.com, then enter the code executive15 at checkout. Alternatively, if you would like to learn more about BlueSteps membership and whether it's right for you, you can email us at info@bluesteps.com. Great, so moving on with today's discussion, we have a really interesting session planned today. Today's speakers are all industry thought leaders from the executive search community, and they're ready to share their expertise with you on this topic. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our moderator for today. Over to you.
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, everyone. I'm Colson Gold, Managing Director of BlueSteps, and it's my pleasure today to moderate our webinar on digital credentials and onboarding solution. And so today we're going to have a slightly more interactive session. But before we begin, I'd like to ask Maggie from Credivera to introduce herself. Maggie, over to you.
Thanks, Colson. Hi, I'm Maggie Rigaud. I'm the Chief Growth Officer of Credivera. I've been in technology for about 20 plus years, and more importantly, to this audience, I owned a boutique staffing agency for the last decade before I joined Credivera. So I've got my hat in both spaces and have a unique perspective on the challenges of credentials and definitely the challenges of onboarding candidates.
Great, thanks, Maggie. So just to start off, just want to give a little bit of background on something that we've worked on with Credivera, which is our Very Blue digital wallet. This was a solution that, as part of BlueSteps, we came up with Credivera and combination of Mintz Group to help with some of the onboarding challenges or issues that executive search firms run into when they are looking to verify credentials for executive candidates. And essentially, just a little background, when you go through the executive search process, a firm will typically verify your highest degree when they start working with you as a candidate, but they will also do other checks such as background checks, social media checks, employment verifications, a number of these. And so with Mintz Group and Credivera, through Mintz, we allow candidates to verify their highest degrees. And through the Credivera digital wallet, which is Very Blue on BlueSteps platform, we allow candidates to store some of their credentials as well as documents such as their resumes, executive bio, and cover letter. And then Maggie will go over more kind of the solution later on. But we wanted a solution for candidates to be able to store those documents, have their credentials verified at source, and also be able to share that with whomever they wanted to share it with, rather than having kind of their documents live out there in the ether on different platforms. And so that's why we worked with Credivera to come up with the Very Blue Wallet. We're going to show you a little video in a second on the Very Blue wallet. But really today we also want to talk about, could digital credentials, a wallet similar to Very Blue, be a solution for your organization or yourself in terms of onboarding challenges? And so we have a very interactive session planned for everyone. We're going to ask you some questions throughout the session, and we're also going to ask you some questions in our chat box that we hope everyone can take a look at and answer as we go through. So just a little background. So to start, we're going to show you a little more about the Very Blue wallet. And I'm going to ask Amy if you can play a video for everyone.
In a world filled with opportunity, verifying credentials and licenses is more critical than ever.
Last year, 40 million consumers lost a total of $43 billion to identity theft.
A $100 million scheme selling thousands of nursing diplomas, now called fake by federal prosecutors.
Fraud and misrepresentation risk reputational damage, financial loss, and public safety. Remember when airports switched to digital boarding passes? It was a transformative moment, making travel faster, more efficient, and more secure. Introducing VeriBlue, a partnership between BlueSteps and Credivera. We are bringing that transformation to your professional life. A digital passport for your career, VeriBlue is a safeguarded, encrypted wallet where you can store all of your credentials and verifications. VeriBlue speeds up the executive search process by eliminating time-consuming verification. At a glance, search firms can confirm your credentials, putting you ahead of the pack. Built with Microsoft Entra Verified ID, VeriBlue verifies credentials in real time, ensuring a zero-trust cyber approach for the workforce. For associations, VeriBlue protects the integrity of programs and certifications, upholding their value in a challenging world. With VeriBlue, securing your professional future has never been easier, faster, or more reliable. VeriBlue, your digital passport to professional success.
Thank you for playing that. So that's just a little background and overview on the Very Blue
Recently,
wallet.
there's been a lot of talk about the role of corporations in our economy.
If we could
And
stop
no one
the
takes the
video.
time to
Okay. Thanks for that. So just a little background. So that was a Very Blue digital wallet. If you are a BlueSteps member, you do have access to that. Like I said, it's available to our members, and it's a solution we worked on with Credivera to come up with. Maggie, maybe you could give us an overview of, how digital credentials and what their significance are in today's professional landscape, as well as a little background on Credivera and how Credivera started too.
You bet. Thanks for playing the video. I think it's always been one of our favorite marketing tools of late. It really does a terrific job of highlighting what the benefit of the Credivera solution is under the Very Blue banner. We are a group of people that got together in 2019 under the guidance of Dan Jurescu. We're a company of experts. A lot of us have worked together over the last 20 years or so in a variety of areas. We've got expertise in identity management. We've got expertise in staffing and executive search. We've got expertise in networking. We're so excited to get together as a group. We have a very small team, but we're very powerful in terms of how we've managed to create a very elegant solution for a fairly complex problem. So 2019, we got together and we started our journey in the high-risk world of construction. And that high-risk world requires people to show up on site with a variety of tickets that they need to show on demand. Often they are things that are a little wallet-sized card that you may be familiar with. But these sorts of credentials are required to be available for audit on demand at any given point in time. And so what our solution did was create an environment where that information could be collected, could be stored securely, and could be portable so that anybody could use it as they needed. So that was our humble beginnings. And the interesting part about that was as soon as we put it out into the market, people were coming up to us and saying, wow, that's a great solution, but I'm a CPA, or I'm a fill in the blank. And what we found was our use cases became enormous over time. We couldn't really keep up to them, actually. So I think we were supposed to, Amy, if you could go to the next slide, sorry. Right. So our model is based on trust. And you'll hear me say that again and again and again. And it's an interesting concept because in today's world, as we get more and more distant from each other, I'm working from my home in Arizona, Folsom is in New York. I don't know where everybody else is, but the interesting part is we need to ensure that we can always create a level of trust between each other, regardless of the distance, regardless of who we are, and how we show up. So what we do is our model, we've created an exchange model, and it's a very easy to implement credential management solution. We're extremely excited about it. We're a Microsoft partner, and we leverage Microsoft Entra to power our exchange. Next slide. Next slide. So we have created what we love to call the triangle of trust. And that triangle of trust is a great representation of what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And why you'll have to bear with me for a minute while I explain this, and you'll see why it is that it's important to you as an individual. So this, as you show up in the world of business today, you have a bunch of credentials. As Coulson mentioned, often people will ask you for your highest degree of education, some background check information, or some other pertinent details about your career and your standing in your career. You want to be able to share that with the person who's going to be hiring you, and they want to be able to understand who it is that they're hiring, and they want to make sure that when you present that information, that it's trustable. So that's the first contact point of trust. What we do is we created a rail, an environment that everybody can play in the same sandbox. So me as a holder, I can share a bit of information about myself with my prospective employer. And it could be my professional designations, it could be my background check, it could be any number of things. And I can share it with people as I see fit. And when I don't want to share it with somebody, if I didn't get a particular job or if that time has passed, I can revoke that access to them. We've grown in an environment of oversharing, I think. And what we've done is we've enabled people an opportunity to share what they need to, when they need to, and for as long as they need to. And we also have a third element within that triangle of trust, and that's our issuers. Issuers are people who create certifications. They can create background checks. They can create my insurance as a company. They can do all sorts of things. These are things that an employer would like to ensure that they can see and verify before they hire me, and typically while I'm hired as well. So what we do is we create this information that's, as mentioned earlier, is verified at source. So anytime I share a document with a prospective employer or an employer, that information goes back to the issuer of that information, and they verify it to the employer and say, yes, this is actually a valid degree, it's a valid and current background check, your insurance is up to date, my occupational health tests are all in good standing. So it's a way of creating a level of trust in a world that is very untrusting. And why we did this is because there's an environment out there of fraud. And this is allowing us to tighten that information and put it all together in a space where everybody knows what everybody is doing. So we're constantly allowing people to ask questions and verify the answers. Next slide, please. And why is that? Any of you who've done anything about onboarding humans finds that there is a plethora of information out there about every given person. This picture on the left represents a binder of credentials that an individual has, and it's a legitimate one that they had to bring on site at specific times. But the visual representation is interesting because these things are all very ultimately very opportunistically can be photoshopped, can be changed, can be manipulated. This environment is ripe for fraud. It's unfortunate to say, but it is true. As you noted in the video, there's tons and tons of fraud out there. And almost every day in the news, you're hearing new and disturbing examples of fraud in the workplace. So what this does is this represents all of the things that a person needed to verify about a human when they were putting them forward to an employer. So what we've done is we've given the individual an opportunity to consolidate that information into an electronic form. And I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. So these bits of pieces of paper have gone from something that you'd hand over, something that could be fraudulent, something you could lose, something you could tamper with. We've put it into an environment where it's verifiable. You can verify it to the person who issued it. It has an opportunity to be portable and consolidated in one spot. So next slide, please. And this is what it looks like in our environment. It's a mobile application that you can share all your data in one form. It's immutable, meaning that it can't be tampered with without record. So every time that somebody changes something, so if I have a degree and I put it into my wallet, into my digital wallet, I have the ability to say, that's my degree, that's never changing. I can't fraudulently tell you that I got a degree from a university that I never went to. These sorts of things become immutable, they become portable, and they're secure. And the great part about them is you as the individual own them. So you can share them with people as you see fit. We have a great story back in the day when you wanted to go to an adult facility and you needed to prove your age. You used to overshare. You'd share your driver's license typically, which divulged things like your height, your weight, your address, all sorts of things about you that a person didn't need. And in this instance, what you can do now is you can just share that you are of an appropriate age to enter that facility.
Great, those are really good examples. Maggie, just thinking about some of the use cases here and how digital credentials can help in so many examples. I think about examples of myself where old resumes of mine are living out there, and you have recruiters reaching out to you for positions that are far too junior because you have a resume that's been sitting out somewhere online, right?
Very true.
That's 10 or 15 years old. But the number of use cases where you could apply digital credentials seems so vast, right? I can think of examples in the medical space, right? In finance, where you may have to show, some of your license verifications. You talked about CPAs, things of that nature. There's just so many where this can be applied.
Right.
Can you just recap for everybody, how important are digital credentials in verifying achievements and activities, especially at an executive level?
You bet. And I think that's the real key is it's important to be able to share what you've accomplished. And you can layer on as much or as little as you'd like to share with individuals. But the ability to have information that is verified at source is quite critical, because suddenly it becomes an integrity test. And as an executive as well, you want to make sure that the information that you're providing people is true. And it's your brand, it's your persona, it's everything about you that you want to share. Not only is it convenient, but it's also something that you want to make sure of. Your comment about information that's dated is well stated. There's so much information out there about people now. We've been in a habit of oversharing for years and years and years. And with this whole movement toward owning your data and controlling your data and legally it's becoming more and more of a thing in the world, certainly in the United States and Canada and Europe. Making sure that you have an understanding of where your data lives at all times is super important. The ability to retract it when it no longer is of need. To your point of older resumes, I think every one of us has been approached at some point or another for a job that they might have probably been qualified for 20 years ago, but no longer fits the scene. So what this does is it keeps everything available in a current format. You know where you've shared it as well. So every record that you send out, you have a record of in its history, and you can do your own audits at times and say, this information really doesn't need to be out there anymore. I can retract it. LinkedIn is full of people who've bought or who've qualified for an association membership, but they may not pay their dues anymore. So associations are loving this sort of a solution because suddenly they have an ability to say, yes, you did have your PMP at one point, but you aren't really a member in good standing anymore. So I can revoke that status of yours. So you really are being more truthful and more trustable about who you are and what you can do.
Yeah, that's a great example about the PMP because, one thing I noticed, especially on LinkedIn, is people try to show their certifications and associations through their name and title on LinkedIn, and you find you find folks who have these very long names. They list out their MBA, their PMP, and all of these accreditations. And if you think about it, like, where else can you really show people all of those certifications, all the associations that you are a member of, right? Your degrees. There really isn't a place or anywhere else where you can store something like that, right?
Right. Yeah, the Very Blue Wallet is a great example of that, actually. It's a great place to share all that information. And when you share it with an executive search agency, they have an ability to say, oh, wow, this person has this information. I can trust this. I can take it to the bank. They don't actually have to go back and verify anything of this with the issuers, which traditionally has been the way. I mean, if you have a list of, I think of cybersecurity people, they tend to have things as long as your certifications as long as your arm, and they don't need to go back and check them. A hiring agency doesn't need to check them anymore with the originator of the certificate, because they know that if they're in the Very Blue Wallet, then they are valid and they are up to date.
Right. Yeah, which is great. I think maybe we want to move into a couple of poll questions for the audience. So we have our first poll question that we'd like everyone to chime in on, which is, how important do you think digital credentials are in enhancing credibility and trust in executive placements? So I'd like to ask everyone to put their choice there, and you get to choose one. But we talked a few examples here. So let's just give it a few seconds. Okay, and Amy, if we could show the results, great. So it seems that 50% actually said somewhat important, and 44 said very important. I actually would have thought a higher number would have said very important, and 6 said not very important, which is really surprising. But Maggie, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm surprised by that as well. It is interesting to see, because I think more and more what's happening is people are your information is being digitized. You're being asked for trustable information about yourself that really it's tough to provide in any alternate format. So up to the minute, real-time information about yourself is really a digital credential. You have the ability to share that or not share it as you see fit, but the availability of it is interesting. And when you think about things like your foundational information is moving that way, you hear about digital driver's license, digital passports, those sorts of things. I think this is going to be more and more pertinent to everyone as you go forward. So it's a bit surprising for sure to see that, but I hope that you see at the end of this conversation, I hope you see the value in pursuing some of those those digital credentials that you can start storing in your own personal wallet.
Yeah, I think so too. We have a second poll question for the audience, which is, are you currently using digital credentials platforms in your organization's recruitment or onboarding process? So this kind of relates to your own organizations that you might be part of, but are they using digital credentials as part of their onboarding process? While that's up, I talked about the example of executive search and placements, right? So part of the onboarding process is doing the background checks and the highest degree verified. And surprisingly, you will find that there are many use cases where people say that they have degrees that they don't necessarily have. Wow, okay. 70% said no, they are not using digital credentialing platforms for their organization's recruitment. So again, a little bit surprising. But what are your thoughts on that, Maggie?
It's interesting because I think it's very true. I think this is something that is emerging more and more, and people are used to doing it a different way. So in the past, we probably knew each other a little bit more. We were more familiar with each other. We had access to people who could refer someone to us. But certainly now, as global movement of employees happen, there's an incredible opportunity for us to move away from that trust and to need to prove who we are and prove our abilities more. So I suspect that if we ask this poll question in a few months, it may be a bit different as well.
Yeah, I think so too. And especially some of the examples we're going to go over in a little bit, I think it will make people,
Right.
Look into digital credentialing a little more. But that kind of goes into, the next topic area is, why do digital credentials matter? And we can talk a little bit about that.
You bet. It's an interesting thing. So for people who are familiar with how you would traditionally check a person's employment record, you would often you were on the phone a lot. Actually, you'd have spreadsheets, you'd have phone calls with people trying to prove that what a statement that was made is true. And what's really interesting is the amount of fraud that has grown over the last few years, and it's really skyrocketing. It's not just growing, it's skyrocketing. And I think one of the things, and we'll touch on it a little bit later, is, the ability for AI to provide really, really truthful looking digital credentials is quite astounding. So the ability for us to actually counter that with a digital credential that is verified at source is really going to be a big push for it going forward. But if you notice, some of these statistics are quite astounding. 85% of job applicants have misrepresented themselves. That's Inc. magazine in 2023 mentioned that. So 85% of the people that come across your desk in a day, when you're trying to place someone at a company and you're under pressure to do it quickly, if you think that 15% are trustable, that's pretty low statistics. So the ability to fix that information and make it faster, or be able to prove that in a faster manner, is really important. 20 to 30% of applicants have actually invented a degree, which is stunning to me. I can't even get my head around that, actually. And the white lies that people are telling, maybe to improve their position and their ability to get a job. I think that you'd always be found out, but I think people are just playing the odds that they may not be. So what you're doing when you start adopting a digital identity persona is you're telling people that you are trustable, that you have nothing to hide, you have integrity, you have a good brand. And so when you start looking at these kinds of statistics, it's pretty daunting. If you can pop to the next slide, that'd be great. So the Identity Theft Resource Center has come out with some interesting statistics in 2023. Oops. I don't know what that video request is. Oh, sorry. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. In 2023, it represented an all-time high for data compromises reported in the United States alone. And what this is telling you is that the level of trust that's required is growing every day. So while you may not think that it's important right now, it's getting more and more important. And there are global factors that are impressing upon companies that they need to do a double check on who you are. You see the emergence of social media checks in the world over the last little while because they want to know who you are and what you stand for. So there's things that are growing every day, and one of the things that's really impacting this is the ability to ensure that people are trustable. And from the last slide, where it talks about how much people misrepresent themselves and lie about their accomplishments and abilities, people are starting to cotton onto that and understand that they need to do a double check on a lot of these things. And when you talk about the number of data breaches, the number of people who have had identity theft, these things are all impacting the trust that people have when they hire individuals. And you may have heard that there's such shortages in certain areas, but shortages should not impact you in a way that you can just ignore where people's data and credentials come from. So what we're providing here is a solution that says, this is how you can stand behind who you are and what you know. And when more and more people start to adopt it and more companies start to demand it, that's when it's going to start to get really important. And you'll see these numbers hopefully diminish somewhat. Next slide, please.
Oh, I think that's our poll question, but before let's go into our next poll question, which is, have you previously encountered challenges in verifying executive credentials during the recruitment process? And so this is from the perspective of your hiring organization or even your own personal onboarding. We could see the results.
Oh, wow, we've got the most trusting group ever.
63% said no, but 38% did say yes, that they were encountered challenges in verifying executive credentials during the recruitment process. So does that seem to tie in with, just kind of some of the stats that you've seen, Maggie?
Actually, it's very dissimilar to many of the stats that we're starting to see, where there's it's probably the inverse of it, actually. So we're starting to see people who are saying that, the degrees are great example, because, as it mentioned earlier, there's so many people who are lying about the degrees that they've actually achieved. And up until now, it's been really a little bit more difficult to verify your education. You had to do it through it was a cost. You had to adopt from a company that would do background checks and education checks. But, now we're starting to see universities and education groups join into our network and say, yes, I can verify that anytime somebody asks me about my education, I can give you any bit of the micro-credentialing or the degrees that Maggie has attained. So we're starting to see a lot more people who are questioning that information. I think it's in response to a lot of the little cottage industries that have sprouted up over the last couple of years that create copies that look very, very much like the actual copy of your university degree or your membership in an association, your professional designations. Those sorts of things are getting more and more important to check.
That's really surprising. I mean, I didn't know that those kind of services existed where they could make, fake degrees for you. But it is, like I mentioned, as part of the executive search and process, when a search firm is going to work with a candidate, one of the first things that they will do is have their highest degree verified. And, I've heard so many stories that, they found instances at the executive level, right, where the candidate doesn't have the degree they said they had. And then, there's situations of, oh, well, I, just didn't finish the last semester, and
Right. Yeah.
things like that, that come up as use cases there, but it is still pretty prevalent.
Yes, agreed. And certain industries are way further ahead than others. Certainly, you want to make sure your doctor has a doctorate, has done his or her residency. You want to make sure that these people have the capabilities and competencies that they say that they have. Certainly, the ability to prove that is important. When you're walking into an operating theater, you want to make sure that the anesthesiologist knows what they're doing before you go under.
Yeah.
So I think that we're seeing more of an emphasis in certain industries for sure. But definitely there's no industry that we've noticed that's immune to fraud. It doesn't take you long. I think in your video, you even alluded to the Operation Nightingale, which was a credential factory, if you want to think of it that way, creating nurses that shouldn't be nurses. And that's pretty frightening when you think about your own health on the line.
It's very scary. I think the one thing we didn't mention is also how it speeds up the process, right, for onboarding. Because, if you can show search consultant, or you can show, the hiring organization, you already have your degree verified, right? Here it is in your digital wallet. You have these association memberships that are verified at source, right? You have other credentials that are verified at source, can really speed up the process. And I think about examples in the medical space where, it could take anywhere from like 6 months to bring on a new physician, because they do have to verify all of those licenses and credentials, right?
Right. It's horrific. It's horrific. And if you couple that with people who are globally mobile and don't necessarily have degrees from North American universities or from local universities, their systems may not talk to each other. So this is a great way of getting your information into a portable format, and it's verified already, so you can skip the queue for sure. We've had experiences with controlled goods people who work in aerospace, who basically cannot get their top security clearances unless they have all of their credentials verified. And that time can just take forever to get it managed, especially if their degrees come from other countries. So certainly the ability to have that information up front in a verifiable format is really critical to these people being able to get onto the jobs at hand.
Yeah. There's, I think, something else that's also been emerging, which is kind of, what is the impact of AI on the world of digital credentials? And I kind of have a little bit of a story around potential deep fake, but we did a webinar similar to this one several weeks ago, and one of the people who joined the webinar, on screen looked just like me and you today, as if we were sitting at a desk, speaking. But sometime during the session, their actual camera turned on, and we realized they were on their phone, in their pajamas, but they were using some sort of avatar to dial into the session, but you would have never known that they were doing that, and it kind of raised this kind of question of, well, wow, you could dial into any meeting and present yourself as somebody else, and those capabilities now exist for people to do that. Had this person not had this issue with their mobile phone, we would have never known that they were, on their phone, because, to us, it looked like they were sitting at their desk and dialed into the meeting. So it was interesting, but also kind of raised, some questions like, what is the impact of AI on digital credentials? And then deep fakes, is that something that we will have to watch out for in the future?
Absolutely, it is. It's interesting because I feel like that is the true countermeasure for AI and deep fakes is a digital credential, is a verifiable credential. So you actually know from source what that individual can do. The ability to create, I mean, your story still makes my head shake. It's just bananas. It's so crazy. But when you think about the fact that you could have anybody showing up for an online interview with you. So how do you prove who you are? How do you prove what you can do? And if somebody else who's more qualified or is qualified can pretend to be you and you're the one that's manipulating that Zoom call, that's a pretty frightening thing. So I think that companies are remiss if they think that this isn't happening now, and it's only going to grow. So the real challenge is to ensure that everything is trustable. And that triangle of trust where you have that individual who is tied to the issuers of the credentials that they receive, presenting those to an employer who can, ensure that they see all of the things that they want to see and from the source that provided them. It's going to grow and grow. It's such an important thing. I don't mean to be a doomsday prophet. I love AI. I think it's very important and it's very exciting, some of the challenges with it, but with every great challenge comes a big risk. And I think that verifiable credentials are the only countermeasure to AI.
Yeah, I think
Deepfakes.
so too. The deepfakes.
Yeah, it's
Um,
incredible.
It is. We have one more. We have another poll question for the audience, which is, how confident are you in the security and authenticity of digital credentials compared to traditional paper-based certificates? So we talked a little bit earlier about the use case of the companies that will make degrees or paper-based documents. So I wanted to just get from the audience how confident are they in the paper-based versus digital credentials? And if we could pull up the answers.
That's interesting. And I think that's very, very telling. I think we have a good story to tell about why digital credentials are better than traditional paper-based ones. That immutability, that you can't mess with anything without a register of it. So if you are a little credential factory in somebody's garage, you have the ability to create something that looks so professional and so realistic. But what digital credentials and verifiable credentials can do is layer on that level of certainty that was created by a reputable source. And it wasn't just somebody's backyard garage PDF machine creating something. I think that's going to be that's a very interesting poll statistic or poll answers, because it tells me that we've got a lot of work in terms of education of why they're better, because they are.
Yeah.
Like I mean, you see people in the news all the time at the highest level, people in Congress who've lied about their backgrounds and their capabilities, people in nursing situations. We have people who are staffing agencies and executive search agencies who are working in the medical profession, and the number of permutations that they have to go through to get a person verified is quite large. Like there's some upward of 40 credentials in this one certain circumstance that I'm thinking of. And when you think that every one of those has to be checked, you're going to notice that people will possibly will take shortcuts potentially, but the ability to have that information in a digital format that you can carry with you. And there's some basic ones that are who are you? What do you do? What have you learned? And then there's the occupational health ones, or the background checks that need to have a cadence of, are you still in good standing? Are you still not a criminal? Those sorts of things need to be updated, but certainly the ability to get a person over the finish line faster is compelling to most search agencies.
I also think about, as an executive, right? You go through a lot of work to build up the credentials that you have, right? And, if you're part of associations, there's member dues that you're paying to have that membership, right? You know, there's, you know, in so many fields, right? In the medical field alone, right? Think about IT, the number of certifications that you go through and the work that you put in for that. And, you know, to know that there are folks out there who are just saying they have these things without putting in that work and effort, right? You really want a way to showcase all of the hard work that you've done and for people to know that you've actually done it, right?
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's a lot of work to get to where you are. And at an executive level, especially, you should be loud and proud about everything that you've accomplished. And I think that the emergence of micro-credentialing is sort of something that we've overlooked as well, because people are constantly learning and constantly growing in their profession. And the ability to reflect that in a way that is meaningful is also important. I love it from an executive search perspective. It's not only is it part of your personal brand, but also it would make you demand it in the organization that you go to. So you want to know that the people you're working with have gone through the same rigor of understanding and search capabilities as you had. So for sure, I would love to see that people think that this is a very interesting and very useful thing to do to build up the trust within your environment. I think it breeds a whole other conversation around trustable companies. So if you're adopting digital credentials, you're really asking your people to have a level of integrity that you would expect to have of your coworkers and your employees. I think it's quite exciting. So it gives you a basis from which you can create a trustable organization.
Yeah, and I think that moves us into kind of the next topic, which is, you know, what are your thoughts on, you know, the advantages of using digital credentials in the executive recruitment process? And then just how candidates can create a trustable persona.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I think that I know BlueSteps, for example, offers a lot of counseling and coaching and things like that should be reflected in part of your credentials as well. I love the idea of creating an environment that is more trustable. And I think that maybe that's just me, but I think the more that I can put in there, the better off I'll be. I want to know about my foundational, I want all my foundational identity in there. I want my driver's license, my passport, my everything. And then I want the stuff that keeps me employed. The things that I've worked hard to achieve, I want to make sure that people I can share them with people. And I think that the whole idea of getting this over the line faster, it can't be emphasized enough. When you look at back in the slides that we presented earlier, the book of certificates, and I know it's not everybody's book of certificates, but it's a good representation of the types of things that you have to share with an executive search agency. So when you're sharing all sorts of things, if you're on the search side, you're sitting there having to refer or confirm every one of those elements. And you have to do it in a bit of an asynchronous manner. It's nice when it's thrown in a book, but you still have to call back and make sure that everybody is this still true? Is this real? Is this a good representation? So I think that the opportunity for people to be faster to the end, to present themselves in a professional and complete manner, and a way that is so secure that you actually own your data. I think it can't be emphasized enough how much we've overshared in the past few years. And now the ability to just hone in on who am I giving this to and for how long. And, you know, you don't have to worry about your data getting breached as much because it's not floating in the ether, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I think that's also, you know, just on on the wallet and what Credivera provides, right? You know, this ability for you to share it with who you please, but also for a specified time period is really important too, because not only can you have the credentials verified, they're verified at source, so you know that they're trustable, but you choose who you want to share it with and for how long, which is a really unique feature, right? Because you could say I'm giving it to the search consultant, but only for 2 weeks, you know, or I'm giving it to this hiring organization, but only for this period, which I think is something you can't necessarily do with other platforms. If I put my credentials on LinkedIn, then I have to go in and take them off, right? But then they're open for everyone to see.
Right.
Right.
And there's certain things you don't want to share publicly. I mean, certainly your occupational health. A lot of companies want you to ensure that you have, I'm going to be extreme, but a drug test before you show up on site. So if that's something that's personal to you. You don't necessarily want to throw that onto LinkedIn. So there's a combination of occupational health. There's a combination of things that are well publicized. I've got my background check on my LinkedIn profile. I'm not scared of sharing that with anybody, but it just shows that I have that ability to be a little bit more trustable. I think that when you throw yourself out there as a trustable human, and people will respond in kind, and certainly the ability to share that information in a timed manner. When I was consulting with a number of places where you'd be a fractional person at a number of organizations, you didn't necessarily need to have your full suite of information at every one of those individual companies, but to share it with them for the term of a contract or a term of employment is fantastic. And I think it helps companies too, because they don't need to worry about storing information past its prime date. So as privacy information and privacy laws get more and more prevalent, I think you'll start seeing a lot more people excited about the ability to manage when their information has an expiry date.
Yeah, yeah, and that's really, great. I think of the other use case, which is, I mean, for myself, right, which is around storing documents, because, like you showed that the paper certificates, right? I don't know necessarily where my degree is. It might be hanging on my wall, right? So, so there's situations like that where, having a digital credential makes it so much easier, right? It's like,
Absolutely.
do you go to the airport and print out the boarding pass, or do you keep it on your phone and scan it when you go up there?
Right.
Situation. So I think it's also just very helpful in a place where you can store documents, right? Especially very important ones. And where it is and you can easily access it and share it when you need to. For me, that's kind of my use case. And I could see that being a benefit for a lot of executives as you build up these credentials over years.
For sure. And I think it's important to realize that that is secure and personal and private, and you own that ability to share it. So many people, I think back in my early search days, companies would ask for a background check and they would own that data on an individual. But why wouldn't you share that with the individual so that they could then take it to their volunteer or coaching their kids' soccer team or something? A lot of these people are asking for a similar type of data. So my background check is my favorite one to share, because I could go coach a kids' soccer team. I could go volunteer at my church. I could do all sorts of things. And that ability to have that information that's been shared with me already that I own, it's about my personal self. So why wouldn't I want to be able to share it with other parts of my life?
Right. Yeah, that's great. So we have 2 more poll questions I'm going to go through very quickly because we have a few minutes, and then just a couple of Q&A questions from everyone. Just if anyone else has any Q&A questions, feel free to put those in the chat or the Q&A box. But let's put up poll question number 5 really quick, which is, if you are a BlueSteps member, have you used your Very Blue wallet? And we'll leave that up for a second for everyone. And this is if you are a member. Not everyone's a member here. All right, if we can show the result. Yeah. Okay, so a good portion said no. Some people are not a member, but I would say if you are a member and you haven't used it, I think if anything, it's a great place to store your executive resume, your bio, cover letter. You can also add your degree verifications and associations. So I do recommend as a member to be using it. You will find it useful. You may not need to share the information all the time, but when the time comes, you will have that available to you to be able to share easily. And then our next poll question is, how likely are you to explore digital credentialing options for executive candidates after attending this webinar? So, this was meant to kind of show you the importance of digital credentialing used in the onboarding process. And just want to understand if you found that information useful and if you're likely to explore digital credentialing after this webinar. Great. So most people said likely. That's good. We're also happy, Maggie and I, to take any questions after the webinar if you do have any. So there's a couple of questions that we have from the audience, but just before I go into that, so this is a little more information about the Very Blue wallet. If you are a member, you do have access to this already. So you would log into your BlueSteps account and you can go over to your wallet page and you will find instructions on how to set that up and how to add information there. But we do have a couple of questions, so I'd like to go into the Q&A. So the first question is, and Maggie, I'm not sure if you know this stat, but it is, do we know what percentage of recruiters are using digital tracking? So
I don't know, actually. It's growing for sure. I don't know the number. That's a very interesting one. I will look into it though and get back to you if that's okay.
Yeah, yep. That is and like I said, the verification of degrees is part of, as far as I know, almost all executive search firms' processes. So they will do that. So they will do a degree verification through a provider like Mint. So if you have that already in your wallet, you can share that with them. The next question was, how is Very Blue different from data flow? So I don't know if Maggie, you're familiar too much with data flow, or if you might be able to answer that.
I'm not familiar with them at all.
Okay.
I do know that they're a primary source verification tool, but I'd be happy to take that one offline.
Okay, yeah. So just a couple of things on Very Blue that we offer. We do allow you to put in your resume, your bio, and your cover letter into your wallet. In addition, and this kind of goes into our next Q&A question, which is, I thought the info within Credivera is also in the BlueSteps wallet. So through your BlueSteps Very Blue wallet, you do have access to Credivera's issuer network. So if one of your associations is already part of Credivera's issuer network, you will have access to that and you can verify through there. So in short answer, yes, it is there as part of your Very Blue wallet. Anything you want to add to that, Maggie?
I think it's important to know that the wallet is your personal wallet. So that information it's not a company that's owning it. It's not an organization that owns it. It's you that owns it, and you're the one that shares it.
Yeah. And then just to add to that, but if you are part of an organization that is looking for a solution for digital credentialing, Credivera is also there. So as organizations, you could actually adapt your own digital wallet through Credivera and then have your employees or potential employees provide their verifications through that digital wallet. So Very Blue is just one example of how we've worked with Credivera on the solution, but there's an opportunity for you as executives in organizations to adopt a similar solution for your own organizations. Yeah. And then the last question is, can you explain more about Very Blue Wallet and how the future employers access it? So Maggie, could you just talk about how you could share your information through the wallet with employers?
You bet. Yeah, and so the information, usually an employer will have a job requisition or a role requirement. And how you share that is by, you can share as much or as little information from that to respond to it. So how employers will access it is they will ask for your credentials, and you will submit them as, here's my fill in the blank. Maybe there's 10 things that they need to see that you have in your kit bag, or one more thing that you don't have and you can easily attain. So you will share that information with an employer for a specified period of time if you're in a job search space. But certainly you have the ability to share it as a URL. It's an immutable, secure share. So it's not something that you're emailing your personal information through the ether. You have the ability to share it securely. They have an ability to access it and look at it, but not touch it, obviously. And then certainly you have the ability to revoke that access when you are no longer needing it to be in their hands.
Great. Yeah. And like Maggie said, so you have the ability to send them a URL. You can also give them a QR code that will access the information. You can choose which pieces of information you do or do not want to share and for how long and with whom. And so that's all available through Credivera's wallet technology. That is, I think, everything we wanted to cover. Just if anyone has any questions for me or Maggie on Credivera, on Very Blue, if you're interested in it as a solution for your own organizations and have questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to BlueSteps at info@bluesteps.com, or you can email lwales at bluesteps.com, and we will get back to you on those. But Maggie, I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and everyone who participated in our discussion today. Thanks everyone for joining in.
It's always a pleasure. And thank you for the answers to the poll questions. That's so exciting.
Thanks, everyone. Back over to Lisa. Bye.
Thank you, and thank you to our expert panel. We hope you found today's discussion informative. And if you would like to learn more about executive search and increasing your visibility to executive search professionals, BlueSteps membership offers a wealth of information and resources on this topic. You'll shortly be receiving an email containing more information about BlueSteps membership, and BlueSteps members will also receive a link providing access to today's recording. If you would like to purchase BlueSteps membership, we are currently extending an exclusive 15% discount for our webinar audience today using the code EXECUTIVE15. And if you have any unanswered questions or would like to discuss whether BlueSteps is right for you, feel free to email us at info@bluesteps.com, as you can see on your screen. Well, that does conclude today's session. Thank you everyone for listening. You may now disconnect.